Since steamrolling onto the Sega Mega Drive in 1991, some might argue that Sonic the Hedgehog has had one too many video games. But have you ever wondered what Sonic video games prompted him to be trying to cook his friends in a frying pan? Or even better, for Tails to be being chased by a demented witch with an obsession with minecarts? This is the 10 most obscure Sonic the Hedgehog video games. Coming in at number 10, it's Sonic the Hedgehog Triple Trouble. Also known as Sonic and Tails 2 in Japan, Sonic the Hedgehog Triple Trouble was made by the Aspect Entertainment Company. They'd made previous games for the Sega Master System and the Sega Game Gear, including Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and everyone's favourite Sonic Chaos. This version was only for the Game Gear, and rather than the previous two games, which were trying to be very similar to the Sega Mega Drive games in that they were kind of a flat 2D perspective, this one tried to create a kind of pseudo 3D sort of gameplay, and it was still a 2D platformer, but it kind of tried to create some kind of depth to the graphics, which was good in that it looked kind of impressive, but it was bad in that it really reduced the frame rate to what I would describe as a piece of apart from being really chuggy on the graphics, this game was also nothing too exceptional. However, there was one interesting difference to the plot. Before Rouge the Cleavage Bat was introduced to the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, the world's first Sonic the Hedgehog treasure hunter was Knack the Weasel. Yeah, I guess. Knack the Weasel decided to steal the Chaos Emeralds while the ensuing chaos, if you pardon the pun, was ongoing. And without realising the power of them, he nearly blows up the universe or something. To be honest, no one's ever played this game long enough to ever really find out what happens, but yeah. Coming in at number 9, it's Sonic Labyrinth. Sonic Labyrinth, if you imagine a 3D pinball table, and then you imagine Sonic the Hedgehog on a 3D pinball table, which sounds like a good idea. But then imagine Sonic the Hedgehog on a 3D pinball table, but he's being slowed right down because Dr. Robotnik has stolen his speed shoes and replaced them with slow shoes for some reason, which is inexplicable and not really making a lot of sense to anybody. So yeah, it's slow and clunky to control. Sonic fails at his one true strength, which is pinball mechanics, and not to mention that the gameplay is just incredibly tedious, where you have to basically roll around. You can't run or anything, you can only roll very slowly. You have to roll into badniks, collect keys to move on to the next stage, and it's just dull, tedious and boring. It's just the most repetitive Sonic game I think there's ever been. Coming in at number 8, it's Tails and the Music Maker, which is a children's educational game for the Sega Pico, for all three of you who remember the Sega Pico. Tails tries to teach children about music in this game, so he's trying to teach them about things like scale and pitch and tempo, rhythm, and how you basically use instruments. But it also has this really interesting feature where you can actually create your own music using the engine. So here's a piece I made earlier. Coming in at number 7, it's Tails Sky Patrol, which is an action-adventure game for the Sega Game Gear. Unlike the previous Game Gear games we mentioned, this one is absolutely atrocious. The game is basically about Tails trying to save the world from a witch called Wendy Witchcart. She's basically a witch who has an inexplicable obsession with minecarts. The game, I think, is a prequel to Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2, but it's very hard to tell because Sonic is not anywhere to be found, and the storyline seems to imply that Tails hasn't met Sonic yet, but the game takes place at the first level is in Emerald Hill. So, I don't really know what a lot to say about it, really. One thing I can tell you is that the only review I can find on the entire internet comes from a Japanese publication called Famicom Tushin, and they gave it 22 out of 40. Nobody else reviewed it. Ever. Coming in at number 6, it's Sonic Athletics. Sonic Athletics is a game which you can only find in Sega's Tokyo Joyopolis, or is it Joypolis? however it's pronounced. It's in Tokyo, it's full of Sega games, and this one is basically a treadmill, or it's like a row of 12 treadmills, and each one of the treadmills represents a different Sonic character. So you've got Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and then you've got other ones such as like, even got Vector the Crocodile. So if you want to do a treadmill as Vector the Crocodile. Anyway, basically the premise of the game is that you get on one of the treadmills, and the faster you run, the faster your character runs, and then you can race the other characters who are also on the other treadmills. I guess that makes some kind of sense, but the idea behind this game is to try and get Sonic the Hedgehog fans to do more exercise. The only problem is that if you're trying to run as fast as you can, I'm pretty sure that you get burned out quicker. Isn't the idea to kind of take a steady pace or whatever? But anyway, it's kind of a cool idea, but I don't think it'll ever get past Japan. Speaking of things that never got past Japan, the 5th entry on our list is Sonic Drift 2. The reason I say that is because Sonic Drift 2 actually did get past Japan, but Sonic Drift 1 didn't. This was a little bit strange because people in America and Europe were a little bit confused when Sonic Drift 2 came out when they'd never seen Sonic Drift 1. Anyway, why is this game on the list? 1, because nobody knows it exists. 2, the people who do know it exists don't really understand where its predecessor comes from. And 3, it just shouldn't exist in the first place because Sonic Drift was possibly the most terrible game that has ever been released with the name Sonic the Hedgehog on it, and that probably includes things like Sonic 06, so that's probably quite a statement. What can we say about this? It was one of the only very few Sonic games to feature everyone's favourite Sonic character, Fang the Sniper, and it also has the unfortunate distinction of being the very first Sonic game to feature Metal Sonic as a playable character. Anyway, coming in at number 4, it's Sonic Shuffle. Sonic, Tails, Knuckles and Amy end up going through some kind of weird wormhole, and they end up in something called Imaginary Land, which sounds very similar to me to Mario Party World, but anyway. It's basically a kind of, it was released on the Sega Dreamcast, and it's basically a kind of board game type thing. So I think you roll a number and then you move a certain number of spaces. And that unlocks weird mini-games, for example this one where you end up cooking other Sonic characters in a frying pan. It's kind of strange. I mean, you can't make that up really. Coming in at number 3, it's Sonic the Fighters. Sonic the Fighters was a arcade fighting game, kind of like Virtua Fighter. It was made by Yu Suzuki's AM2 studio, and basically this game was, it was basically Virtua Fighter with Sonic characters, which, if that doesn't sound strange enough, it gets a little bit weirder because not only was this game ported into English, it was also done quite badly. Dr. Robotnik, for example, is spelt with a C in this game for some reason. It includes other favourite characters, such as our favourite Fang the Sniper, who I think we've already mentioned, but it also includes other favourites, such as Bean the Dynamite, whatever a dynamite is. It also includes someone called Bark the Polar Bear. Inexplicably, if you manage to unlock him, you can also play Yuji Naka, who is the creator of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. I'm pretty sure that was done so Yu Suzuki could repeatedly beat him up for crashing one of his Ferraris. Coming in at number 2, it's Sonic Schoolhouse, which is an educational game for Windows 95. It teaches kids how to read and write, do maths and add up sums and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. You know, the things that the kids are into. It includes some 2-player mini-games though, which includes collecting rings, which basically involves you running around a schoolyard collecting 5 rings. That's literally the whole minigame. There's another minigame which is kind of like a basic match the statues thing, so you have to find one statue and then find the matching statue. It's very strange. A bit like those card games where you match one card to the other. There's also a really strange field trip section where Sonic gets onto a bus and then we all watch videos about animals through the windshield of the bus. Not really sure what that's about. In terms of its overall packaging, it's actually a pretty nice game. It actually uses sprites from the unfinished Sonic Extreme project, believe it or not, and it actually seems to play kind of similar to Wolfenstein 3D, which is a bit of a strange thing to say, but if you just imagine that the crazy killing Nazis have been replaced by bouncing colourful letters, then you can sort of see how that comparison can be made. The only unfortunate thing about the game is that it tended to trigger B-suds in Windows 95, which is always a hallmark of a classic Windows 95 CD-ROM title. And coming in at number 1, it's Wacky Sonic Patrol Car. I'm not really sure what to say about Wacky Sonic Patrol Car, really. It's a police car. Sonic the Hedgehog is a police officer. You ride inside the police car, you chase Dr. Robotnik. It exists. Very little is known about Wacky Sonic Patrol Car as it was only released in Japan, but more recently we have learned some things, as these things still tend to be loitering around in Japanese shopping malls for some reason. It features the first appearance of the Japanese voice actors for the Sonic and Dr. Robotnik, who would later go on to voice the characters in the Sonic Adventure series and beyond. In fact, the voice actor for Dr. Eggman is still doing the voice to this day. There was an English version of this game created, but the machine was never exported into any Western countries, and I think there was probably pretty sound financial motives for that decision. So the game is pretty short, and it has a pretty short premise as well. Sonic has to chase down Dr. Eggman for basically committing what the game describes as a minor traffic offence of throwing bombs into oncoming traffic. You just can't make this stuff up, can you? So that was the top 10 most obscure Sonic the Hedgehog video games. Did you like this video? If so, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment down in the box below. If you didn't like the video, then I guess you hit the other button, which kind of looks like a thumbs down. And I suppose you still leave a comment in the video below, but you just leave some disparaging comments explaining how you think I'm a bald twat who doesn't know how to make YouTube videos, and that you hate the world and hate everybody, and probably use a load of swear words. You don't even know how to use spells, so you probably use the word you instead of the word you and stuff like that. Anyway, thanks very much for watching this video. I will catch you on the next one. Take care. Ta-ra.